There you go.
Yes. It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
Welcome to the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. And happy training camp day. All the teams are heading to the rink. They're doing all their media, different rooms, doing their interviews, doing all the fun skate ups for the Jumbotron. Lots of busy days going on around all the teams in the NHL. And we'll talk a little bit later in the show about who we're kind of keeping an eye on and who is an intriguing team to watch as we enter into training camp. But first, we've got some NHL news, some big stories that are continuing to be headlines we want to touch on, and that is Kirill Kaprizov. Let's start with that one because it was going to be the biggest deal in NHL history. And reportedly, he declined 8 years, $128 million, not enough to keep Kirill in Minnesota for now. So if he's turning that down, guys, then what the heck does Kaprizov want in his next contract? I mean, is it money? Is it term? He's getting both from that offer. Or is it maybe that he just doesn't want the deal to be with Minnesota? Let's talk about that first, Michael, kind of what your sense is on what Kirill is sort of feeling right now. And then we'll touch a little more on what happens if they can't figure things out.
Yeah, Katie, I don't think it's money. Like they're really throwing everything at him. Like to be the highest paid player ever in NHL history, you can't offer him more. And you're right. They're offering him full term. I think the term is what the sticking point is, not because they can't go greater than 8, but I'm thinking if I'm Kirill Kaprizov, like, do I want 8 years? This is a Minnesota team, and you look at their playoff success, and they very much look like the Toronto Maple Leafs of the Central Division. They make the playoffs and then they're out in the first round. Like they've only reached the conference final once in the Minnesota Wild history. And that was before Kirill was on the team.
Right.
Most years they just, like I said, they're good enough to make the playoffs, but then when they get in the playoffs, they're out in the first round. And if I'm Kaprizov, how many more years do you want to look at, potentially being one and done? So, I don't blame him and maybe even Connor McDavid for looking at a short-term deal because it gives you flexibility, and it also puts a lot of pressure on management and ownership to say, all right, you better be a competitive team and better be a cup contender, or Kaprizov is going to leave after 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, Ryan, are you feeling like the thrill isn't hitting Krill at this point with Minnesota? What are we looking for here?
That's where things seem to be pointed, right? Because as Mike mentioned, I mean, it's not the money; it's more than anyone has ever offered.
Yes.
I wonder if it is like him looking and saying, like, you know what, I'd be much more comfortable with 4 or 5, and obviously for Minnesota, you don't want to lose that player after that. It helps that he's still under contract for this upcoming season, obviously.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Wild, they certainly have challenges being in that Central Division with Winnipeg, with Dallas, with Colorado. But they do have some up-and-coming players that are difference makers. Like we've already seen Brock Faber on defense and how good he is. Zeev Buium's coming in as a rookie. He got his feet wet last year at the end of the year. He could be a completely different type of defenseman who can be a difference maker for them.
Yeah.
And then, Matt Boldy entering his prime. We've already seen him do great things for Minnesota. So it's really about, can the Wild take that next step? And I mean, it almost feels like an audition, with Kaprizov saying like, okay, like, is this the best you can surround me with? And, I mean, it's his right as a UFA if he gets there to go wherever he wants. But Minnesota is going to try to make that push to say, we're building something here. We were hampered for years with the Parise and Suter buyouts. No longer, we can spend with a plum. So let us build around you.
Yeah.
They have the money. It's a great market too, Ryan. Like you and I have both been in that area. I don't know how much you spent there, Katie, but Minnesota in the States is as good of a hockey market as you're going to find. And to Ryan's point, they have a ton of cap space. So, I actually like what Bill Guerin's been able to build there. I think they do have some intriguing pieces coming up, like Ryan mentioned, in Faber and Boldy. But, it is a show me season for the Wild.
Well, playing devil's advocate then a little bit, because obviously they do not want him to reach the point where he is a UFA and they get nothing for him. If they're starting to feel like, I don't know, this isn't feeling right. The water's getting colder. What are the Wild going to potentially be looking at to maybe do with him? Where could we see, just having fun with this, but where could we see him potentially going if they really decide to just cut bait and try to cut their losses if they don't think a deal is going to get reached, Ryan?
Well, the team I'm looking at is the Carolina Hurricanes, right? I mean, they've gone big a couple of times recently. They landed
Either
Mikko
Mikko
Rantanen. It didn't
Rantanen.
work out. Yeah, it didn't work out, but they did get him.
Yep.
And then they tried for Mitch Marner. They didn't get him. So they have the cap space to do so. They have an owner that is willing to spend on elite players. Like, Tom Dundon will go big. We've seen that before, and that's kind of the word around the campfire. So, I could see Carolina wanting Kaprizov to put them over the top, right? Like, here's a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations that has fallen short the past few years. Now, the question is, what do you get in return if you're Minnesota? You don't want to lose Kaprizov, so you're going to be asking for the world. Right. I'm wondering, just looking at players that do not have no move clauses, would you be willing to part with Seth Jarvis in order to get Kaprizov? And this is horrible, would you trade Jackson Blake, who is from Minnesota, former Moorhead Spud, that just signed that huge extension? Would you send him the other way? I don't know.
That's interesting. I would do Seth Jarvis. I love Seth Jarvis as a player, but it's not even a competition. Like, Kirill is, top 5 in the league, in my opinion, amongst forwards. And Seth Jarvis is a really good player who's not top 5.
Wouldn't be 1 for 1.
Right. I mean, what other assets do the Hurricanes have to offer up, right? Picks and all of the goodness. Yeah. A couple extra guys. But
Jarvis, Bradley Nadeau, and a couple of firsts.
Exactly. Another option, I imagine the Rangers would probably be in on this if he was available. Like, Panarin's also entering his final year with the Rangers, so you're going to free up some cap space. Maybe a Lafreniere goes the other way, who's, it's almost dollar for dollar. Again, it's not a 1 for 1, Ryan.
No.
I don't think the Minnesota Wild would be happy with getting Lafreniere and losing Kirill. But,
Lafreniere, EJ Emery, and a couple of firsts.
It's Matt Cooley.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe he'll like the bright lights of Broadway. We've seen other players in the past who can just get kind of sucked into the idea of playing in the Big Apple and the kind of glitz and glamour that comes with being a part of the New York Rangers. But if Kirill is solely focused on wanting to be a part of a team that's going to be winning soon, who knows where he could be going. Let's talk about those New York Rangers, though, because they just named JT Miller their new captain, 29th captain in franchise history. So the Blue Shirts now have a new captain and a new head coach, Mike Sullivan. So JT Miller, is he the answer in New York? And kind of a two-part question here, because what does him being named captain of the Rangers sort of say about the fact that he was just shipped out of Vancouver? It certainly really just continues to add to the intrigue of what the heck was going on out there, because clearly New York feels like they found something great. What do you guys think?
It's a bold move. It is a bold move. Like, you got to think, JT Miller was at the center of that whole soap opera with him and Elias Pettersson, and the Vancouver Canucks ultimately chose Pettersson and moved on from Miller. And he's barely been in New York, and already he gets the captaincy over some decent choices. And like, Adam Fox would have been, a perfectly easy pick for captain. He's won a Norris. He's a franchise defenseman. He's been with the Rangers, since he forced his way over to New York. But, the Rangers maybe are looking to shake things up. Like, obviously they didn't have the season that they wanted last year, and they underachieved by, a significant margin. So maybe Miller's the kind of guy that can kind of go in there and elbows up and ruffle some feathers.
I like it.
Yeah, and what I would say is not only of JT Miller, but you have Mike Sullivan coming in as a new coach. So, you have a new leadership group sort of like behind the bench and in the dressing room. And, I was in Las Vegas last week for the Players Tour. We were talking to Will Cooley, and he talked about what an impact JT Miller had immediately when he
Right.
came over to New York. And guys like Miller and Vince Trocheck have been players that Cooley has looked up to in his young career. And keep in mind, Miller and Trocheck are really good friends. Like their wives hang out, their kids hang out. The Millers were living with the Trochecks when the trade happened.
The Pittsburgh connection.
Exactly. They are Yinzers. They are proud to be Yinzers.
Yes.
I actually asked Miller about that at the Four Nations. But, I think what it says about Vancouver at the time was Miller was much more tradable than Elias Pettersson. Pettersson was struggling. And I think there was questions like, would you rather have a fiery competitor who has shown that he can get you 90, maybe even 100 points? Or do you want like a slight guy who is not fiery, who can maybe get you 100 points? And clearly the answer for New York was we want the fiery guy. So I think Miller, he is captain material. So it's not super surprising to me, especially since, he has roots in the organization as well. This is his second go around with the Rangers.
Yeah, there's familiarity there. And again, I think it is like a little bit of a personality pick. And with Mike Sullivan coming in, he's new, Miller's new. There's clearly a bit of a new direction that they're trying to take and maybe going a little off the board as opposed to the obvious choice for captain with Adam Fox is another part of the message they're trying to send and this new sort of team culture that they're trying to establish to kind of get back on track for the season. All right, well, let's talk about Flyers GM Danny Briere. He told media that Carter Hart, goaltender who was obviously a part of their organization for a while, departed, that the Flyers they were contacted to say that, look, Carter is looking for a fresh start, so that door to Philly seems to basically be closed. It's also reported that Hart is looking for a U.S.-based team, so all those Oilers rumors might kind of be out the door there as well. The goalie market it's hot as ever. People are always looking for them. They're a commodity. Where do we see Carter Hart potentially landing, Michael?
Good question. Would you be surprised if he doesn't end up anywhere this season?
Totally possible. It depends on what teams think they are, how desperate is a team? What do they need?
Yeah, desperation is going to come into this, Katie. And I think there's probably a lot of teams putting out feelers for Carter Hart, but they're also wondering or waiting to see what happens with their goaltending situation. I'll circle back to a team that was desperate a year ago and they maybe found their guy, maybe didn't, but the Colorado Avalanche have Mackenzie Blackwood. They also have Scott Wedgwood. I don't think that's a 1-2 combination that's going to get them another Stanley Cup. It's two guys that basically failed at World Juniors for Canada. That's how I remember them.
Okay.
Maybe Blackwood can be that guy, but if you're looking for an upgrade, either over Wedgwood or just as a safety blanket, maybe Carter Hart is the guy that, they do look at, midway through the season.
Right.
Yeah. And keep in mind, with the Hockey Canada 5, they can't sign right away and they can't play until I believe December 1st.
Yeah.
So, teams
have some
will
time.
Actually, they have time to assess what they have in the regular season. And, there could be injuries. You never know. You hope not. One team I would look at, and again, this is certainly not a guarantee, right? Like I agree with Mike, like maybe nobody signs him, but the Buffalo Sabres, right? Like I was just hearing today, Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen is kind of like sore already. They're saying it's not, it's nothing serious.
Scans are clear, but
scans are clean, but and Alex Lyon's their backup, and
they've got Georgiev now in the mix.
Yeah, Georgiev, but like how'll that work out? So, if you're the Sabres, I think you're kind of like, whatever, like maybe we need to try. But again, like how's it going to sit with the fan base? At this point, maybe Sabres fans are like, we're just
they'll make a deal with
we can take whatever. We've seen it all.
Buffalo, don't do it.
And maybe it's too close to Canada. I don't know. But that's a team that certainly does not have a settled goaltender situation.
Yeah, that World Junior team, they won in Buffalo.
That's true.
There you go.
Too close to home. Again, it really, I think, is going to come down, like we said from the beginning, to a team that gets into a situation of desperation, whether that be from injury or just really poor performances to start the season. They're just looking for anything to get them back in the mix. But again, this is someone who has not played hockey in a very long time. You do not know what you're going to be getting. And there's absolutely no guarantees that Carter Hart of old is going to be popping right back up in net. Chances are, at least to the start, that will not be the case, because goaltending of all the positions, I think, would be one of the hardest ones to have that much of an extended time away from the game. We shall see. All right. Talking about players that are not available to start the season, a couple notable injuries, at least as we kick things off. But which one is the biggest blow to his team? Michael?
I'm going to go Zach Hyman. And I think it was a blow to the Oilers not having him when they played the Florida Panthers in the final. That could have been the X factor.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Hyman, he's a net front merchant, as he's been called, but especially with, the Oilers have lost Evander Kane. They've lost Victor Arvidsson, Corey Perry. They've lost a significant amount of offense. And now to start the season without Hyman, it just adds a lot more pressure on number 97 and Leon Draisaitl. So, I don't think that it's going to be the difference between them not making the playoffs or not. But if you're looking at the Pacific standings, it could be the difference between Oilers finishing 1, 2, or 3. And if you're the Edmonton Oilers, finishing third or second means you play the LA Kings again. So
no.
So
I mean, honestly,
it's going to happen.
I think I'm not rooting for anyone in that division. I don't care, but I'm certainly rooting to not see that again. My gosh.
Well, all of Los Angeles agrees with you, Katie.
They sure do. They sure do. All right, Ryan, who's going to be missing from action? That's going to be a big storyline for their team to start the season.
Well, I'm going to go with Matthew Tkachuk in Florida. I mean, he's such a valuable player as is. And, much like Hyman in Edmonton, I don't think the Panthers are going to be scraping for a playoff spot. They're still going to be one of the best teams in the East, and they will be a Stanley Cup favorite. But what's interesting now is that you can't accrue cap space, right? We've got that new playoff cap. So there's literally no benefit whatsoever to Matthew Tkachuk missing a couple of weeks, a month, whatever it happens to be. You're not going to be able to get a Seth Jones or a Brad Marchand because somebody is out of the lineup. So I think, not only are you losing one of the most effective players in the NHL, but you also can't do anything to replace him long term.
Yeah, but I think the Panthers, if we learned anything from the last few seasons, or even from what Tampa had done previously, just get into the playoffs.
Yep.
They'll take on anybody. They're not scared of anyone. I saw a comment from Bill Zito, from all the GMs pretty much speaking today at these opening days of training camp, saying we're humble, but we're hungry. I don't know if everyone would agree with the fact that the Panthers are humble, but it was certainly, maybe that's the new mindset. Okay, starting from zero, as Sergei Bobrovsky said, maybe that's how they're entering this new season. Because I think following those 2 wins and their summer celebrations, I don't think humble is a word people would have used to describe it. But that's what you earn the right to be that way when you do win back to back. So we'll see how humble they are, and we'll see if not having Tkachuk maybe is a humbling experience. All right, let's talk about a team who has a lot of new things to look forward to this season because of the departure of one Mitchell Marner. The Maple Leafs lost their guy. The core 4 is done. We already heard Craig Berube, I think it was, joking about that during the availability he had today. Not hearing core 4, at least for now. So the first line right winger job is open. Who is going to be taking that spot? Michelli, Max Domi, William Nylander. Who's filling the hole that Mitch Marner has left for the Leafs, Ryan?
I think Matias Michelli makes the most sense because I like the depth they have with Nylander being on another line with John Tavares. I think Michelli, he's a great playmaker, and Austin Matthews is obviously one of the deadliest goal scorers in the world right now, especially if he's fully healthy. So to me, it feels like a good fit, right? You've got the brawn with Matthew Nyes on one side, and then with Michelli, you've got the playmaking where, he's not Mitch Marner, but he can be that elite passer that can dish to Matthews and to Nyes.
Smaller guy, a little skill there for sure. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to depend on what Matthew Nyes is this year. And if he takes that big step forward and basically can be a running mate for Austin Matthews, then you don't really care who's the right winger, because then you're going to have a nice
Totally.
1-2 punch with
Mhm.
Nyes and Matthews. But, if Matthew Nyes is nothing more than, basically another version of Tom Wilson, and a guy that just, can go into corners, get you the puck, and
Mhm.
score some goals here and there, then you do need a more skilled guy. And for that reason, I'm thinking maybe William Nylander is the guy that, plays with Matthews. You look at how Tampa has structured their lines. Kucherov
Yeah.
doesn't play with just average Joes. He's on a line with Braden Point, Jake Gensel, and that's why
Mhm.
Kucherov is always in the mix for the Art Ross. So if you think that Austin Matthews needs to score you 60 plus goals, then you might be saying, all right, he needs to be playing with elite talent. And if that's the case, then put William Nylander on his line and load it up with Matthew Nyes on the other side.
So the challenge from that then always does become, though, how deep is your forward group, right? Because if you are stacking that top line, there's going to ultimately be the trickle down effect to, do you have enough support on lines 2, 3? And Leafs GM Brad Treliving spoke to media today, confirmed in a question that he is still very much targeting adding a top 6 forward. And that kind of speaks to what you're discussing here, right? Like there still maybe is a need for some added depth, a little bit more firepower in the top 6 group. Who are the Leafs looking at? What are the options that still kind of exist out there with players who remain unattached to teams? And what could we sort of see happening with that goal of adding one more piece to the top 6?
Yeah, it's funny. Last year they were searching for bottom 6, and now after getting Nick Roy and Dakota Joshua, it's the
Hmm.
reverse problem. Now they need a top 6, and I agree with Brad Treliving. I think they do need it. I'm surprised that Jack Roslovic, like, there's been so much smoke around Toronto about how he's destined to come to Toronto. I imagine that they're needing to create some space, so they're
Yeah.
just waiting to see if
Hmm.
David Camp or a Nick Robertson gets traded first, but.
Right.
That's the guy I'd be circling. Ryan's mentioned this before. Jack Roslovic and Austin Matthews go way back, all the way to playing at the national program in the
Hmm.
U.S. So there's a natural fit there. I think that you can put him down the middle or in the wing, and he's going to do fine. He's not a top line guy necessarily, but I
Right.
don't think you'd have any problem with him on your second or third line. And that's the guy I'd be looking at.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, training camp could help a bit because there are internal youngsters that you hope could step up, like an Easton
Sure.
Cowan, or even like I'm going to keep an eye on Miroslav Halinka, who's had a very nice junior career to date and has been very good for the Edmonton Oil Kings out in the dub. But if not there, I'm wondering if, because of cap space and the little that the Leafs have right now, do you throw a PTO to a Robbie Fabry? A guy who, when healthy and granted, years ago, could put up some numbers
Mm,
and, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle and
right.
find something on your second line or maybe even your third line. But I think you probably want him in a somewhat of a scoring role. Um, and again, like it's a PTO, you sign him for like whatever the league minimum, and maybe there's some bonuses in there. But I think the Leafs, I mean, they have between $1 and $2 million worth of cap space right now. And as Mike pointed out, you could trade somebody if you needed to get more for a Roslovic. But if not, I mean, why not take a flyer on someone?
Ryan, that's interesting about Easton Cowan. Like, what are your expectations on him? Because, he could be that guy that's just a revelation as a rookie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I think this is going to be a really good challenge for him because playing for the London Knights, he got the best development you can possibly get in junior,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're a factory there.
Pro team, not even
Yeah.
close.
Yeah, exactly. But now you got to play against men full time. They're bigger and stronger. So, what can you do to distinguish yourself as a top 6 threat? And Cowan's not that big a player, but he can play both sides of the puck. He kind of did everything in London as his career went on. So, I would love to see him
Mhm.
make things difficult for the Leafs.
Yeah.
I would love to see him force his way into that top 6 because there's no point having him in the bottom 6 at this point. You might as well have him in the AHL. But I would love to see him, be a good problem for the Leafs
Yeah,
camp.
he almost like the way he's projected, like at his best, he's Mitch Marner.
Yeah. And
But
that's a lofty
If
goal.
all short of that, that's certainly not a terrible place to be.
Totally.
no, at his worst, he's Nick Robertson, I was gonna say.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
You
so
get
easy
30
there,
points
Katie.
or 70 points.
Okay, perfect. So we've got a lot of room in between those two things. We'll see. I mean, just talking about trading Nick Robertson. So who knows? We'll see what Cowan forces the Leafs to do. Quick follow-up. How quickly, if things don't start off, maybe the Leafs want, could we see them pulling the trigger on making some type of a move to ensure that they do have the forward group they want for the majority of the season?
I think that's a really interesting question because it's a hard division. We keep saying that, like, it's not just Tampa, it's not just Florida and Toronto as the big three where you can just pencil them in at the top of the division. Like, Ottawa's coming on strong. What a season they had last year. I expect them to be even more competitive. Montreal is another team now that they, beefed up their back end with Dobson. I expect them to be a huge threat as well. So, I jokingly said, maybe not so jokingly, that Toronto could be in danger of missing the playoffs, but really they are an injury or two away, like a significant injury to either like a Matthews or a Nylander, or even on the back end to being in danger of, potentially being a wild card team or even worse.
I'm not that worried. They still have two incredible goaltenders and a lot of defensive depth, and they still have John Tavares and William Nylander. But it is a tough division, no doubt. I think Boston's going to surprise some people, and Detroit, they have to go all
Forgot
out.
about them for a minute, right?
Yeah, they finally have a goaltender in John Gibson. So it will be a tough division. But I think that, you give it sort of a month, I would say. And again, we mentioned Nick Robertson. I think it's to the point where you say, like, okay, you got to show us something consistently. And they have to play him consistently, to be fair. But if you're not seeing that upside, then you got to move on at this point. Like, there's enough of a track record there to say, like, if we don't see more, then we got to move on and free that space up, because he's not a bottom six player. Like, he doesn't have that type of game. So you need him to produce. And if it's not going to happen, then it's not going to happen.
And nothing makes it easier for teams to move on from players who they've kind of had around, given some chances to, than a young guy coming in and showing flashes of the future, right? I think it's so much easier to just commit to, if Easton Cowan comes in and does make a splash. Okay, we've got enough faith in this. We want to see it out. We want to develop. The young guys always get the benefit of the doubt. Speaking of the opposite of young guys, today, as we are recording this episode, it is Alex Ovechkin's 40th birthday, a big one. So last season at the age of 39, obviously we talked about it plenty, set the NHL all-time goals record, passing Gretzky. He posted 44 goals in the 65 games last season. So can Ovi continue with the type of scoring production that we saw again this year? Or is there going to be this post-record breaking hangover drop off? What are the expectations for 40-year-old Ovi, Ryan?
My expectations are not that high, Again, I mean, we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. His shooting percentage last year was 18.6%. That was the best in his career.
Wild.
And he's Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Like, he is the best goal scorer of all time. And he was shooting at a clip that we've never seen before. So let's think about, Washington. Their goal is not just to get him the record now. Their goal is obviously to make one last big playoff run with this particular group, right? Because don't forget, like, John Carlson is in the twilight of his career as well. So it's not just Ovi. I mean, TJ Oshie is already in the broadcast booth.
I know.
I think
that whole group.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, obviously he's going to get 900. I think he's at 897, if I'm not mistaken.
We're good. We're good for that.
We're good on that. But having said that, is this his last season? I don't know. Feels like there's maybe rumblings of that. Yeah. But the fact, like, as soon as he gets to 900, like, that's the benchmark. Like, I don't think he's going to get 1,000 in the NHL.
That would be
so
ridiculous. He'd have to play a lot longer. I don't know. I mean, we said
a lot longer. I don't even know if he plays another year after this one, he could probably get 950.
I don't see 1,000 being.
Yeah, how about this? Ryan and Katie, over under on goals Let's set the line at his birth date, okay?
Okay.
So he's 40 years old. Over or under?
This
Under.
season, under.
Under. I'll
Yeah.
say over.
Again,
I think he'll get like 35 or like
he was
38
hurt
or something.
for a good portion last year and still got 44. So healthy Ovi the whole year.
Like last year was magical, but I still think he gets more than 40. Like it's
Our
Ovi.
producer saying death, taxes, and Ovi scoring 40. I love it.
Time
He
is
wakes out of bed
undefeated,
and
people.
he can have 0 goals by December and still finish with 40. Like he's that guy that just scores in bunches. So
he is, but yeah, like, you know, like I'm in my 40s. It's a rough time, man.
Is there something that happens? Is it like one of those things where you're
your
like,
writing hasn't fallen off, Ryan? Your
And
writing
why,
hasn't
thank you.
fallen,
I
right?
appreciate that.
I think that just gets better with age. So
yeah, but you just start bumping into things, you know. It's tough.
Watch out for everybody. Watch out for Ryan
Also,
Kennedy in the press boxes
be
this
40
year.
though. Like, are we sure he's 40 and not celebrating his 50th birthday?
Yeah. Is he
Russian,
actually 42?
Yeah.
There's always a chance. You never know for sure.
More salt and pepper in that hair.
Translation there.
Yeah.
Either way, most the average 40-year-old wouldn't score one NHL goal in any season because they probably wouldn't even be able to keep themselves up on the skates with the pace of the game. So we'll give Ovi all the credit in the world as he deserves. But happy birthday to the great 8. All right, as we mentioned at the top of the show, it is the start of NHL training camp. So lots of teams that are intriguing, different storylines across the league. Which team to you, Michael, start with you, is the most intriguing heading into camp / kind of just want to see what they're going to do in these opening games of preseason?
I'm going to say Utah. I think this could be a quote unquote mammoth year for them Utah Hockey Club, or formerly known as.
Well done.
Yeah, they surprised a bit last year. I love that JJ Peterka trade, acquiring him. I think they have just a real interesting group there. And I would love to see playoff hockey in Utah. Like I didn't get to see a regular season game this year, but it looked like the crowd was great. The arena looked amazing. And like I said, I think Bill Armstrong, is built like a real good foundation of a hockey team there. And, Clayton Keller deserves to have, some success for spending all that time. And now that he's the captain, I'd like to see it happen. But we'll see what this team is made of. It's a tough division. And I think that's why when you say like which team I'm intrigued in, like training camp might tell us a lot about which way they're going to go.
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to stay out west and say Colorado.
Okay.
We talked to Cale Makar at the Players Tour. He was very optimistic, and he was saying, look, like we had a lot of distractions last year, injuries and let's not forget the whole Valerie Nichushkin situation, which was a big distraction.
Right.
Yeah, Gabriel Landeskog's back now. I think that helps them on the ice a bit, but it helps them tremendously in the dressing room because he is the captain and his voice carries so much weight with the Avs. And you bring in Brent Burns, who
another
that's
40-year-old. To see him, I'm like, gotta keep reminding myself this is an Avalanche guy now. Ooh.
Totally. But he doesn't have to be the guy, right? They have Makar and Taves as their top pairing. So, Burns, whatever he can do for them is kind of a bonus. And also, again, a great guy in the room that's going to bring some levity to things.
Yeah.
And if McKinnon gets too intense, Brent Burns is a huge man. So, like it's not just on Landeskog.
Keeping him in check.
So I think Colorado's they're in a position to be very successful this year.
Yeah, Landy has to take care of the entire team, but then he also has to keep Nathan McKinnon in check, and he is an absolute pro at it. There's just such a level of respect there. And I know Brent Burns, just from a geographic standpoint, feels like he's just going to thrive in Colorado, like where this mountain man mentality is going to explode. I mean, can't even imagine what he's going to be doing on the rare day he gets off, just out in the wilderness.
Hiking.
Living his absolute best life out in the Rockies. All right. Well, remember that the Big Show is presented by Sticks.com. You do not need to break the bank on sticks with composite stick when you can get a pro price tag by going to Sticks.com. So Stix.com is the name. Make sure to go check it out and gear up. All right, we got a bunch of rapid fire to get to, so let's dive right in. We talked earlier about the Rangers naming JT Miller their new captain. which leaves two teams in the NHL without a captain still. We've got the Boston Bruins and the San Jose Sharks. So which team will be naming their captain first, and who will it be, Michael?
So I think Celebrini is going to be the next captain of the Sharks. However, you got to wait, I think, for Couture to officially retire and also for Celebrini to get a little older. So I'm going to say Boston. I think it's going to be Charlie McAvoy.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens this year.
Yeah,
I agree 100% on both counts with Michael. I think they'll wait and give it to Celebrini. And also McAvoy, again, another guy that was in Vegas on the Players Tour. And, he didn't say that he wants to be captain, but you could sense that he is ready for that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Pasternak are kind of like the holdovers now from the older era of that. Yeah, that classic Bruins culture that was started by Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron. So it feels like McAvoy's a good option there.
Yeah, I like it. And I feel like with Boston, again, there was, so much discussion last season with the change of coaches and the questions about culture, the departure of Marchand kind of impacting that. It feels like they want to get a new voice and a leader established, I would think, pretty quickly. Part of me is actually a little surprised they haven't named anybody even up until this point. So I do feel like that's something that will be coming soon. So I would say Boston for sure will be the first one to get a captain. All right, NHL season begins October 7th. We got a triple header. We've got Blackhawks and Panthers, the two-time champs, raising that banner. Penguins and Rangers, and the Avalanche with the Kings. So which matchup has your eye, Michael?
I don't know why I'm intrigued by this, but part of me still thinks that the Penguins could be that surprise wildcard team that, or dark horse team that just sneaks and gets a wild card spot.
That would
So
be a
I am
surprise.
intrigued to see how they start the year, what Crosby does. Obviously the LA Colorado game will probably be more competitive, or might be more competitive. But for me, if the Penguins can hang with the Rangers on day one, that might give me a little bit more optimism that this year could be interesting for them.
The Blackhawks are going to just come out and smoke the Panthers.
Yeah, that one's so boring. Like, I'm sorry.
It's like, when you're, what is it? Well, here in the States, like for high school football, I don't know if it's the same up there, but when you have the homecoming game and you always are very specific to choose a team you're going to beat because you want homecoming to be fun. You want everyone to have a good time. So that's always what I kind of equate these banner raising games to. It's like, okay, no one wants to get beat at their own homecoming. Nobody wants to get beat at their own banner raising. Let's schedule the Blackhawks. So what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, it's like the junior teddy bear toss games. It's like you don't want to be playing like the best team in the league and get shut out.
And then no one gets to throw their bears. That happened at Robert Morris this year. They had
there you go. Well, I was like saying Mikey DiPietro, when he was in junior, had 3 shutouts on teddy bear toss games. Ooh. So I called him the Grinch.
It's for the kids. Come on.
It is. They throw them after the buzzer. It's fine, but it is kind of a bummer. For me, it is Colorado and Los Angeles. Because it's like a measuring stick, right? I think these are two teams that are want to get back to the Stanley Cup final, and both certainly could. And so I think it's going to be very competitive. It'll be fun to see some of those new guys on the teams, like a Brent Burns, for example. Unfortunately, it sounds like Corey Perry is going to be out for the beginning, but we'll see him eventually.
Little knee problem, I think it was, but we'll see. The worm, he'll be back, and he'll probably lose in the finals because that's what happens to Corey Perry. We'll see if that goes. That should be a sports bet. Like, will Corey Perry lose in the finals again this year? Yes or no? All right, we'll have the NHL Stadium Series this year. They've got it at Raymond James Stadium, home of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Lightning hosting the Boston Bruins. What is your favorite outdoor venue? And I guess maybe what's a venue you would like to see an NHL specialty game played in, maybe that they haven't, Ryan?
In terms of favorite, I'll go with what was Ralph Wilson Stadium in Buffalo. That was the initial Winter Classic.
That was so good.
Yeah, and then they also had the World Juniors USA versus Canada one there. I attended neither because I've never actually been to an outdoor game. I'm always at the World Juniors, and it's cold. I don't need that.
Oh, and you didn't do the World Juniors in Buffalo where they did the outdoor game?
No, because I was just doing the medal round, and it was before that. And I'm glad I didn't because it was like a huge blizzard and super cold.
So
Brady
cold.
Tkachuk scoring in the shootout, though. It was
Hey,
good.
I salute him for everything he did.
That's right. He didn't salute.
I'll
That's
watch it on
right.
TV. Yeah. In
Okay,
terms
out
of
on outdoor games.
in terms of an outdoor venue that we haven't seen so far, I mean, it would be really cool to do something like the Rose Bowl, right?
Ooh.
At West, like we've seen them do it in California already.
Yeah.
I think it was Dodger Stadium they did.
Mhm.
But the Rose Bowl, I mean, if you got the right teams in there and you could pack it, that would be pretty cool.
If you can do it in Florida, you can do it in Texas. So is that
Yeah.
where the Rose Bowl is?
No,
Texas?
it's in California,
California. Oh, what am I thinking of?
Pasadena.
Anyway, football's
You're
not
thinking
my
of the Cotton
jam.
Bowl.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah.
am. Thank you. What do you think, Michael?
So one of I've done I think 2 or 3. And my favorite was the Big House when the Leafs played the Red Wings.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah,
Huge stadium,
that's
similar to what
incredible.
Ryan's talking about. I don't know about the interesting ones. I remember there was like a KHL All Star game in St. Petersburg Square or Red
Oh, yeah.
Square, whatever.
Oh,
So in
yeah.
Moscow.
Yes.
That was interesting, and it got me thinking. Like, it'd be kind of cool to do it like in front of the Parliament buildings in Canada. And for Katie, who doesn't
Oh.
know that, like Canada is a country, and Ottawa is the capital, and Parliament
I have
buildings.
been there. The canal is right there. You can
Oh, play
skate
on the
on it.
canal.
Oh,
Back
and the
in the
canal would
day,
even be better, Katie. That's
you
even better.
Might not be regulation.
acting like I don't know all about
Yeah.
Canada.
All right, so on the canal, you can get your beaver tails and Tim's
Yeah.
while watching the game. I love that. All right, Katie, I apologize.
There you go.
Perfect. All right. Let's get that going. We'll get it started. Although the problem has been that in the last few years, every time I'd ever gone to Ottawa, even when it was cold and winter, it was not cold enough to skate on the canal.
Oh,
So we've
There
got
you
to
go.
make sure that's real frozen. We don't want any players going
this
missing.
isn't political, but global warming is a thing.
It's
It's
just
real. It's depriving
we're
us
just
of outdoor
talking
hockey.
about just the logistics of
Yeah.
this idea we've come up with just now. All right. How about Marc-Andre Fleury? One of the best, finishing his career as a Penguin, that PTO to get. He's going to play in parts of the September 27th preseason game. I had people texting me from Pittsburgh saying they were buying as many tickets as they could. This is a big deal. The guy might play one period, might not even be the whole period. But that's just the love that the city has for him and always will. So it's very cool to see him doing this. So let's give some examples maybe of your favorite players ending their career with a team that they had a legacy with, Ryan.
I'm going to go Jerry Rice with the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, he's like an iconic NFL wide receiver. He had so much success with the 49ers. He played for a bunch of other teams later in his career, but then he went back for that one-day contract. I'm not sure if he was one of the first to do that, but to me, that's a really cool one.
I like it.
I'm going baseball. I'm a massive Blue Jays fan, and Doc Holliday signed a one-day contract to end his career with the Toronto Blue Jays, where he spent most of his career. Obviously, he I think he won a World Series with the Phillies through a no-hitter in the playoffs, but he's always been a Blue Jay, and I think he was the first Blue Jay who went to Cooperstown as a Blue Jay.
Wow.
Doc Holliday taken way too soon, obviously tragically, but that's the guy I'm going with.
I like it. All right, last one. We're running out of time here. But Michael, you wrote an article talking about some of the comments from Tage Thompson on his thoughts on if the NHL were to change the playoff format, if we got to see additional teams added in. So real quick, yes or no for fun. If the NHL were to include more teams in the playoffs, would the Sabres make the cut?
Yeah. Shout out to Ryan for getting those quotes because he was at the Player Media Tour and was asking Tage a lot of these great questions. And the question I have for you, Katie, is how many teams would it take for the Buffalo Sabres to make the playoffs?
That's a better way to phrase it.
Yeah, because two's not going to get it done, okay? We may have to go to half a dozen or even more.
All the teams get in, and then there's
the
a couple playing games, and then the Sabres get a chance.
Yeah, it would have to be like they were like in Major Junior where like 2 teams missed the playoffs.
Yeah. Yes. And even then.
And even then, we're not sure.
All right. Yeah, we could do we got our one intern saying do it like March Madness, and you got your like that would be they would have a shot. Poor Buffalo. We won't say anymore. We hope they make it. There's so many players on that team that I want to see playing in playoff hockey.
Totally.
So
well, Ryan's got the magazine behind him. Buffalo Charge. Like, how many years ago was that, Ryan?
Not many. That was from like 2 years ago.
When's it going to happen? When's this Charge that you so speak of?
Yeah. They're working on it.
At least they have the Bills.
Yeah.
Just keep rooting for the Bills. All right, guys, great stuff as we kick off this new NHL season with training camp starting today. So many more fun storylines to follow as we get ready for that very first puck drop of preseason and then obviously the regular season. But that does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. For Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy, I'm Katie Gaus, and we'll see you all soon.